Hey, you geeks! Last week, it came to my attention in the comments section that there seems to be some confusion over what is the iconic 80s/90s fantasy romance adventure trope, cliche thing for how to start the third act, which fascinated me. And as I struggled to get through some of the saddest chapters in my entire book, I figured that we're going to spend more time talking about what that iconic trope is, how it works, and why we don't see it anymore. That way, if you're new to this series, welcome. Let's talk about literary tropes a bit before getting into my own story. Maybe the algorithm will smile upon this slight change of topic, but maybe it won't. Either way, I appreciate you for watching these videos so much. Let us take it aside here to discuss what I consider to be the most iconic 80s and 90s fantasy adventure romance trope. I'm taking a sample of films, most of which I shoved out in the poll earlier this week that's currently running today as I record this. The films I listed in the poll with this trope are Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, First Night, which apparently no one has watched, myself included, but it has this trope, so I figured I'd include it, and Disney's Black Arrow, which I don't think anyone else has watched aside from me, which I watched as a young child checked out from the public library. Because I saw this when I was in my Robin Hood Prince of Thieves fangirl era, which frankly I don't think I've ever actually left, more on that later, I really liked it as a kid. However, as an adult going back, it's definitely been visited by the Suck Fairy. And because this is a Disney home video release, I don't think it was ever supposed to be this mammoth work of artistic merit that I had built it up as a child. So we take the good things from this film and use them in our own stories to make them better. Since I posed this question on Threads, where I'm getting a lot of 80s movies like Legend and Willow, I'm realizing that this might be more of a 90s trope thing. And since I'm a 90s kid, this I guess makes perfect sense, especially we see it kind of up through the early 2000s and Disney Renaissance, like The Little Mermaid, although it's gender flipped, and even Pirates of the Caribbean makes use of it but doesn't follow all the way through. What is this trope, you may ask? It starts in part 2 when the female lead and the male lead love interests have some quality time together. They develop a relationship, a sort of camaraderie, and then Act 2 ends when the two are separated, with the most iconic element being the man she is supposed to be married to or get married to come to rescue her. So that's why I gave you guys the hint last week about how, oh, by the way, there's a guy the female lead is supposed to be getting married to from Act 1. He shows up at the end of Act 2 to save her, much like Prince Humperdinck does to save Buttercup from the clutches of the dread pirate Roberts. We see this in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, when Robin, in variation, sends Marion back to her home safely under the supervision of his male servant, who is blind. And then as soon as Marion gets home, Sheriff of Nottingham kidnaps her, and the end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3 is the battle for Sherwood Forest, which they lose. And then Robin becomes aware of Will Scarlet as a traitor / his long-lost brother, and they have a great little bromance, and then they go off to save the day. Just love that story, and I'm definitely keeping those parts in it for me. What you should know is the first story I ever wrote fanfiction for is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I didn't even know about fanfiction.net yet. I wrote it in a tiny floral notebook that is around here somewhere. I just need to find it. Before I became a Cosmere obsessed fangirl, I was a Robin Hood obsessed fangirl. And when I watched RRR a few years ago and was reminded about how awesome it is when guys fire fire arrows, I was like, oh yeah, we need to get back to your roots. So Marion is taken by Sheriff of Nottingham, Buttercup is taken by Humperdinck, Fiona is taken by Farquaad. They were going to marry beforehand, but now, at her insistence, the deadline is moved up. We see this in the Pirates of the Caribbean, where Norrington does legitimately rescue Elizabeth from a shipwrecked island and then agrees to marry her as a condition of rescuing Will. They don't get to the wedding in Pirates of the Caribbean, but that is the direction the plot is going at the beginning of Act 3. Little Mermaid does a gender swap of this where Prince Eric falls into Ursula's clutches and then immediately agrees to marry her under compulsion. And Mulan to Shang has his fake out death falling into a ravine, and Mulan offers herself up to marry the son of the other emperor. In Black Arrow, the female lead, Joanna, has all of about 5 minutes as a 2-rider, 1-horse situation with the male lead, Sir Richard. Oh my gosh! Which I guess establishes their romance interest. Now, most of Act 2 of the Black Arrow is Sir Richard hunting down Lady Joanna, the female lead, who has run away from her impending arranged marriage with Sir Daniel. At the midpoint, Sir Richard finally corners Joanna and tells her to get on his horse. And then, like, the next 5 minutes of them, 2 riders, 1 horsing it, before the villain's minions shoot Sir Richard in the back with a black arrow. And Joanna then covers for him and says that he's dead and lets herself be captured so that he can go free and eventually rescue her, because I guess apparently they're in love. Yay! Last and probably least variations of this trope I've seen are Excalibur and First Knight, where King Arthur comes across Lancelot and Guinevere, Kissing, at the end of Act 2, meaning that they've committed treason and he now must take them both-ish into custody and held them accountable. So why has this trope all but disappeared? Well, there's a whole Disney imploding their entire concept of storytelling. I think another is the whole move away a female character's goal at the end of a story from marriage to self-fulfillment in some other way. Though marriage as a concept and plot point still has its place in romantasy and other fantasy stories, especially in romantasy where characters aren't just getting married but getting mated, so magically bonded by their souls. Kind of like Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, but slightly more creepy. However, all of that is generally approached with more nuance than can be approached in a novel less than 100k words, or a 90-minute, 2-hour movie flick where most of the plot is spent on the action and adventure and less on the relationship. Black Arrow's a 90-minute film. They've only got those 5 minutes on horseback together to establish that they're a thing. As a byproduct, even the villain wanting to force a female character into marriage against her will just doesn't have the time to really, I think, give the female main character her due in establishing why what she is doing is heroic. In Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, in The Black Arrow, and based on the Wikipedia article, let me know if I'm wrong down in the comments, the 80s movie Legend similarly have the villain take the heroine, and her ability to do what the movie portrays as a heroic act goes to 0. Black Arrow, they give Joanna some character motivation in surrendering herself to the villain to let the other guy go free, though it raises the question of why don't she just become Katniss Everdeen basically and hide her and her supposed love interest in a cave while the people who were looking out to off them were on the riverbank. Pirates of the Caribbean handles this better, obviously, because Pirates of the Caribbean handles everything better. In Elizabeth agreeing to marry Norrington as a wedding in order for him to go rescue Will. Norrington's not a bad guy, he's just not the one she loves, and it's a very quick plot moment where she just says, "Do this for me as a wedding gift," where she is given the power to make this sacrifice to move the plot forward. And it's very clear as to why that is her only option. Just because of how the whole plot was constructed, we don't need an elaborate reason for why that seemed like a good idea at the time. But because not everyone can do Pirates of the Caribbean, not even Disney anymore, we're left with the fear that heroines are going back to Maid Marian-esque in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, who is kicking and screaming and utterly helpless and sort of useless the entire wedding secrets of the film. Or Princess Bride, where she's agreeing to marry him as a last resort and then has plans to unalive herself after the ceremony because that's the only thing she can do. She feels she can do. Thus, in order to fix this problem, I think we need to remember that a heroine being forced to marry a villain should have the same motivation that Captain America does when he jumps on a grenade. He wants to save others. He knows that this task is going to end him, but it's what he does because he's a hero. The approach I'm taking with my story is that the female main character is agreeing to this arrangement because she has no other options and she thinks it is what is necessary to save her people, as that's what motivates her the entire story. Now, the male main character, who has generally developed some sort of affection for the female main character, lets her go by some flavor of fake out death or just she's in a different location, like Robin Hood responsibly sent Maid Marian home, and then it was from Maid Marian being home that she got kidnapped. The Princess Bride is a difficult one to categorize because Buttercup kind of does make that sacrifice play that I was talking about earlier, where she asks Humperdinck to promise to spare Wesley, and then she agrees to go with him to his castle. That gives her some form of agency in this situation, although she immediately does like a 180 afterward and is trying to get out of it. And I don't blame her, but it doesn't make her acts seem heroic. Some sort of emotional drama for Buttercup of did she abandon true love in order to go for power? And there's the fear that Wesley saw that situation that way and he's abandoned her because she appeared to abandon him. Pirates of the Caribbean is another interesting one where Will technically does have a fake out death as a part of the whole greater entire ship being captured again by the Black Pearl. And he then uses his leverage to ensure Elizabeth goes free, but fails to specify when or where. Oops. Only because of that chain of events is Norrington able to rescue her. Shrek is probably my least favorite reason for why the two separate, and that's because they've just had a fight and are still angry at each other because they both share their same insecurities but are not mature enough yet to talk about them. So, he just lets her go with Lord Farquaad, thinking that she would want to be with Lord Farquaad, who is pretty. Of these options, I prefer the fake out death because I don't really think the audience is going to believe that male main character is dead. But dang, I've gone 2/3 of this book with male main character basically saying, I am going to defend the female main character with my life, and I'm going to help her achieve her goal that's going to save the world. So come at me, bro. The only way female main character is taken by the villain is over male main character's more or less dead body. And as it happens, the Lancer, who I mentioned in the 5-man band discussion, has a giant wolf, somewhat reminiscent of the wolf that ate Odin at Ragnarok. Convenient. And I'm also a Balto fan, so rather than having the Disney sequel fake out death by falling, we have male main character getting eaten apparently by a giant wolf. I am so happy to have written that. Which gets us to the last bit of this iconic trope where the usually male main character crashes the wedding to save the day and the damsel and off the villain. In The Princess Bride, which mixes it up because they end the wedding early because it takes him so long to storm the gate, Shrek makes it in time to disrupt the actual ceremony. And back to my favorite iconic movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, has the courtyard scene where the Sheriff of Nottingham has scheduled to unalive the merry men and especially Little John's young son, and then Robin Hood shoots an arrow through the rope, and it's iconic. I love Mask of Zorro, don't get me wrong. It's on the list, but it's still number 2. Anyway, which brings us to where my story is eventually going, which comes complete with an epic courtyard battle scene and followed by Robin Hood's iconic need to get over the wall flight to save Maid Marian from her forced marriage, which is where we get back in line with Shrek and the I Object. Black Arrow has, oh my gosh, Sir Richard. It was a lot cooler when I was a kid, but we still have to appreciate Sir Richard crashing Joanna's wedding to the villain in black leather. Like, not even Rhysand pulls this off. We just need to have more leather-clad wedding crashers in the world. I am working to remedy this problem, but don't worry, I've identified it. And we see this in Little Mermaid, where Ariel gets to crash a wedding with Scuttle, and Shang comes back from the dead to crash Mulan's wedding in Mulan 2. Thus, it's going to be even more fun in my particular story when male main character crashes her wedding to the villain in a church-like building that is complete with rose windows. And RRR reminded me how cool it is when flaming objects crash through rose windows. Based on the poll, none of you guys seem to like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Let me know down in the comments, does this fix the ending of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, or at least the tropes at large in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves for you? Now get back to my normally scheduled writing vlogging. Chapters 23 and 24 are like the saddest chapters in the entire book, with a giant asterisk because of how in progress or in flux chapters 23 and 24 are. My current word count is 64,643, bringing my percentage up to, bing, 71.83%, which is a steady pace. Now, I don't think that the reader is going to believe that male main character is dead, but I do expect you, the reader, to understand that the female main character is not genre savvy and truly devastated by this turn of events. So I am going to make you, the reader, suffer for 2 whole chapters straight at the other characters dealing with the Lancer's apparent betrayal, and then a 3rd chapter where they finally decide to do something about it, and, revelations might be made. Who can say? Now, yes, I am good and stuck in chapter 24, where female main character is an emotional wreck, and her mother is trying to give her a pep talk, while also kind of like, well, gee, if you weren't gone, I could have taught you these things about your magical power. Have some chicken soup. Frankly, it's probably going to end up being up to the beta readers and sensitivity readers to make sure I get this tonal balance correct. One area that I did get a lot of work on this weekend that contributes a very small word count, 337, are the chapter names and epigraphs of this book. This is, of course, going to be a fun romp with fun chapter titles, and every good epic fantasy needs their epigraphs so that the reader understands better context of what's going on page. And I had to write the epigraphs, or at least all the epigraphs, up to chapter 21 before I could finish chapter 21 and 22, because those are the clues for how the characters find the magic MacGuffin. They are written in story, and I refer to the characters finding the clues, the characters analyzing the clues, mainly female main character. But I never really go into what the clues are apart from feeding them to you in the epigraphs one line at a time. And they are poetic, of course. So having to write basically a 21-line poem that was rhythmically pleasing, had a consistent-ish rhyming structure, and kept in the tone of the writer of these clues, who may or may not be Odin. So we have fun with that. I really have a lot of Odin derivatives in this story. I apparently really like my tricksters. I much prefer writing about characters who are having a good time, or at least if they're having a miserable time, I'm having a good time writing about them. Like the female main character getting caught in a tug of war in the midpoint action sequence where she is literally the thing being tugged back and forth. Like, she's not having fun, but I'm having fun. Whereas when we get to chapter 24, I don't want the reader to have fun. This is the serious part. And gee dang it, I need to reel myself in and just write it. With that thought, this is only a one-day diary for this week. I will buckle down and finish writing this and get back to the fun parts starting next week. Please like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Bye!